Kia ora te whānau I hukaraiti, ko Andrew Doubleday. Aho. Today we're looking at the text for Sunday the 27th of August. It's Matthew 16 verses 13 through to 20. But I'm really only going to be dealing with the first part, and I think you'll see why. The other one is really quite separate message. And it's a text that I've sat with over a bit of a period and found that the more I sat with it, the deeper it took me. You might want to try it. Verse 13 of Matthew 16. When Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still other Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. I want us to notice the progression. The first thing he asks is, who do other people say that I am? You know, the masses, the people out there. And they said, well, some say that you're a reincarnation of John the Baptist, others of Elijah, others of Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets. It's an out there kind of response and question. But then he homes in, he says, yes, but what about you? Who do you say that I am? And immediately Peter responds, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." There's a kind of correctness about the answer, isn't there? There's a kind of giving mental assent to a proposition. All of it's true. And there's also a kind of statement of faith on Peter's behalf. And yet, there's something more that's being invited from us. Because as I'm sitting with it, I have the question being asked of me. And what about you, Andrew? Who do you say that I am? Who do I say that you are, Jesus? And as I just respond, I'd have to say, you are my light and my life. And I know that when I say that, it sounds really pious. But what I mean by it is that I recognize that I cannot do life on my own. And that's the truth of it. Does my life reflect what I have just said? Not by a country mile. I fail to live up to that pretty well every day in terms of what an appropriate response would be to one who I have just claimed is my light and my life. One who is the source of all that is good. One who has offered into a broken soul fresh beginnings. Of one who knows his own weakness and failings, forgiveness and new beginnings. But it's the truth. It's who he is to me. And what it does for me in answering that question is showing the gap between who I am and who I appropriately need to be, or could be, or maybe, to use terrible words, should be. But it leads to another question. And the question comes from me, but Jesus, who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? It's a question we can all ask. And there surely has to be a simple answer. And the thing that immediately comes in is the same words that were said of Jesus at his baptism. This is my dearly loved Son. I'm his boy. That's who I am. Whether I'm worthy or not is not the issue. This is about a declaration on his part. And it's true for all of us. It brings me again to Romans chapter 5, where we read those, I think, very precious words. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Think about that. He didn't die for the perfect. He didn't die for those who have just put on a good performance. He didn't die for those who have just all scrubbed up and look the part. He died for those of us at our worst. Very rarely, he goes on to say, will anyone die for a righteous person? No, for a good person. Someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, when we were at our worst, it's at this point that Christ reaches towards us and says, they're mine. I want to restore them. I want to bring them into a place of life and of light. I want them to experience the fullness, the wholeness of my love, and to become the people that they can be. It's at that point he does that. Because these are my brothers and sisters. These are my sons and daughters. That's who they are to me. And then I find myself taken deeper. So who is this one who gives himself so freely for me? This one who has declared his love for me when I've been at my worst, my most resistant, my most rebellious, my most selfish. Who is this one? We discover that he's the unifying principle in the universe. Paul says of him, and when he's in Athens, he says, in him, and he quotes the Greek prophets, the Greek poets, he says, in him we all live and move and have our being. It's this one. When he writes in Colossians, he says, in him, in Christ, all things hold together. So that when I'm out walking the dog in the morning and we're heading down the pathway and the dog wants to pee against the weeds and we're brushing against the bushes and I can feel it against my legs, all these things are things that Christ, in his love, in his authority, in his power, are holding together. Not just my life, but everything. And if he lets go, it all just disappears. But it hasn't, and it isn't. And there's more. The aging John says about him, testifies about this God, something of a profundity about his nature. In 1 John 4, that God is love. He says, we have known and believed the love that God has for us. All of this is motivated by love. God is love. And those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness on the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in the world. He shares with us something of his majesty, of who he is with each of us. It's this one who is our light and our life. Who do you say that he is? Who does he say that you are? What are you going to do next? God bless you. Amen.